Members, it is this time of year, and we have an issue that we're dealing with. So, Finance Full will reconvene or will convene at 10 o'clock. Thank you. I'd like to call the Finance, Ways and Means Committee to order for April 28th, 2021. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Representatives Campbell, Camper, Crawford, Faison, Freeman, Gantz, Garrett, Gillespie, Hawk, Hicks, Lamar, Lamberth, Lynn, Miller, Ogles, Sexton, Shaw, Sparks, Todd, Whitson, Williams, Wendell, Zachary, Vice Chairman Baum, Chairman Hazelwood. Madam Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Are there any announcements or personal orders before we get underway? Seeing none, we have the appropriations calendar up today, and I do want to note we had a couple of delays actually, and that was because there was an amendment. There was conversations between the houses of the General Assembly, and an agreement was reached on something, and that amendment is now, it's scanned in. You'll be able to look at it, and we'll hear an explanation of it in a moment. So there was nothing nefarious going on. We just had some last minute work to do. As anyone knows who's been involved in this for a while, the budget document is a living, breathing document that doesn't get on black and white till pretty much the last minute, and hopefully we're there now. So we will be taking up the appropriations calendar. The first item is the appropriations bill, which will include the legislative amendments to the budget. The document for this legislative amendment is posted on the dashboard for members. It's on the General Assembly website for the public, so everyone can look at that, including the amendment that has just been added or will be added. And for those that are accessing the document on the General Assembly website, you can refer to the House Committee tab, which includes a proposed amendments button.
Okay, members, item number 1 on our calendar is House Bill 1153 by Chair Lady Hazelwood. We have a motion and a second on the bill. There are several amendments. The first one is amendment number 1. It's drafting code 7334. I'm sorry, 7834. We have a motion and a second on this amendment. I think it may be most efficient if we vote to put this and a couple of other amendments on the bill. So absent objection, we are voting on adding amendment number 1, 7834, to House Bill 1153. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Amendment 1 goes on the bill. We have a second amendment. It's drafting code 4242. We have a motion and a second on the amendment, and I think it might be most efficient if we go ahead and put this on the bill. So absent objection, we're voting on adding amendment number 2, drafting code 4242 on the bill. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. So amendment number 2 goes on the bill. Okay, amendment number 3, which is drafting code 4567, is next. We have a motion and a second on this amendment. And we have an amendment to this amendment. This is going to be amendment number 1 to amendment number 3. This is drafting code 7938. We have a motion and a second on the amendment to the amendment. And I think at this time, we'll recognize Chairman Zachary to provide a description on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This simply just provides funding for this particular piece of legislation. And with that, I move passage.
Okay, what I'm going to request is that we roll these 2 amendments into one new amendment. I'm sorry, we need to adopt the motion to add amendment number 1 to amendment number 3. So all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, next, we are requesting that we roll these 2 amendments into one new amendment. The drafting code on this new amendment would be 4400. Do we have a motion on that? Motion, second. All in favor say aye. Ayes have it. And we have now adopted the third amendment, which is 4400. Okay. Now the bill as properly amended is ready for a brief discussion by Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this is the budget. For the state of Tennessee, the proposed budget for 2021, House Bill 1153. In this amendment, we have several new sections. We have some other amendments, and I'll go over those quickly and then stand ready for questions. In Section 58, we have other additions to the budget. That includes additional appropriations, departmental revenue, and positions to the budget. 59 is legislation, and that's where we're funding new expenditures for proposed legislation, and it reconciles the appropriations to fiscal notes for the legislation that has been recommended and that we expect to be passed if it hasn't been already. Section 60 is the base and cost increase reductions. That lists the proposed base and the cost increases that are now recommended, along with those things that would be reduced. Section 61 is other supplemental appropriations. That's where you will find the legislature's proposed supplemental appropriations. 62 is the capital outlay provisions, and that's where you'll see the recommendations for new and reduced capital outlay appropriations. Other amendments on House Bill 1153 in Section 2, we're dealing with capital outlay and major maintenance. We're earmarking in that section, we're earmarking funds carried forward in General Services capital planning budget for 2 ongoing projects. In Section 4, deals with the Department of Revenue and corrects the departmental budget total. Section 7, there's earmarked appropriations, and it updates the earmark of appropriations for the Southern College of Optometry and the earmark for the Governor's Early Literacy Foundation. And both of those you've heard a great deal about, either in this session or in past. Section 9 is the sum sufficient appropriations from the departmental revenues, and there are 2 new items there for merchandise sales at the Department of Ag Spaces and donations to the Department of Education Commission for Education Recovery and Innovation. Section 13 is the Board of Claims, Property Insurance, and Risk Management, where we're authorizing transfer of appropriations from the state treasurer to the new state captive insurance company, which will, I think, bring a great deal of new business, really good business to Tennessee and help our economic development. Section 29 is higher ed, deals with disclosed capital outlay from school bonds and institutional sources. Here you'll find the list of additional capital outlay projects for UT, the Tennessee Board of Regents, and for the locally governed institutions, the 4-year schools, the LGIs. Section 29 also authorizes the transfer of the balance of a closed scholarship program to the TSAC reserves and declares the legislative intent for the University of Tennessee to acquire and assume operations of Martin Methodist College. Again, something that I know everyone in this legislative body has heard a great deal about from President Randy Boyd and others. Section 36 is the carry forward and appropriations for certain unexpended balances. There are new carry forwards there for the Attorney General oversight of the state health plan, F&A's transportation grants for mental health patients, which is something several of you in this legislature have been working on for quite some time. Other things like the wine and grape board and so forth. 39 deals with program expansions. Section 43 is, that's where you'll find the estimated reversions to the general fund from places that we have over appropriated in the past and all the monies weren't expended. And we have a revenue fluctuation reserve in Section 47, and that updates the total deposit to the rainy day fund. I would like to proudly note here that in the governor's proposed budget, there was a $50 million deposit planning to go into the rainy day fund. The legislature has decided to double that, and we will be putting $100 million into the state savings account. Section 55 is the hospital assessment bill, and that just reconciles the appropriations to the fiscal notes of the hospital assessment bill. Again, that bill, if you will remember, brings about $1.7 billion into our TennCare fund. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would stand ready for questions.
Thank you for that explanation, Chair Lady Hazelwood. Questions on this bill? Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Madam Chairman, thank you for carrying this extraordinarily good piece of legislation. It's the only responsibility we have constitutionally each year. And I know, members, that that was a lot of information. I just want to highlight about 5 things that are in this budget that every year there's some of the big items that almost get glossed over because there are a lot of bills and appropriations and everything else we're all looking at. There's a $250 million deposit into our pension fund. The treasurer's been watching that for years, and the return on investment that we had expected is simply less than what it was projected to be. We made promises to all of our state employees and to all those that have been state employees and have retired that we would keep that pension fund at one of the best funded in the nation. We have been there. And with this $250 million deposit into that, that is making good on those promises to our state employees. So I want to say it loud and clear. We thank you for all of your hard work. We thank our state employees for serving this state. And I am absolutely going to make sure that we are never in a position like some of these other states where they are negotiating with their employees on reneging on their promises. We're going to make good on our promises. So that's a $250 million investment. There's $100 million in here that goes to the cities and counties. And that's been something that has been debated back and forth really over the last 2 years on how do we make sure to get money back to our cities and counties if we have a surplus. This $100 million, the way it's been structured, will be available very shortly after July 1st with virtually no strings attached. That's because we trust our locally elected officials to make the decision on how best to spend that money, and an effort on our part to try to alleviate any desire to raise property taxes so that we are continuing to make sure to help them with expenses they might have during this time. There's $50 million in here that's directly back to the people. It's a $50 million tax cut on groceries and food in restaurants. So I'm just highlighting 2 more things, and then that'll be it, because there's a lot more in this budget that the chairman and team and this committee have put together that is an extraordinarily good budget. But I want you to be able to talk about these things back home. There's literally $200 million in here for broadband over the next 2 years. That's $100 million a year. A $200 million investment in broadband is huge for this state and our rural areas. There's $100 million in the rainy day fund. And then there's one thing the chairman has championed that she is too humble to brag about, but there's an increase in our DIDS employees up to $12.50 an hour. That may not sound like a lot, but that makes a massive difference for those that are caring for some of the most fragile Tennesseans that we have. And the chairman has championed that. And Madam Chairman, I deeply appreciate you being a real hero for our DIDS employees and getting that up to $12.50 an hour. Even a few weeks ago, I don't think anybody would have ever dreamed that we would be able to go that high. I know that your desire is to go higher on that, and then hopefully in years to come, we will do so. But I noticed you left that off the list when you were talking about it a while ago, and I wanted to highlight it. So thank you for your leadership on this budget over the next few days. Thank you for your leadership over the last few months. And if you'll dig into this budget, ladies and gentlemen, it is a phenomenally conservative budget. It is one of the best budgets I've seen in the time I've been down here, and it's due in large part to our chairman's leadership. Thank you, Chairman.
Chairman Todd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with the leader that there are a lot of good things in here, and we're making some good investments for a number of things. One disappointment I did have is that we're not attacking this unfair professional privilege tax immediately and fully. That's actually been eliminated. That discount that we were going to offer for 1 year has been eliminated. That's a disappointment. I'd rather see the whole thing go away for everybody. It's not a privilege to do business in this state. It's a right. And I want to keep fighting for that. And I hope next year we can fully eliminate it once and for all. The other issue that I have is with broadband grants. One thing I'm imploring ECD to really consider and look at is how we invest that money. Wired technology, even fiber, is becoming outdated. This whole state is about to be covered completely with low-level satellites, service to every single home without us investing 1 penny into it. I would encourage ECD, and that's coming in months, not years. That is literally this year. People are signing up for it right now. Once it's turned on, they will have broadband internet at speeds and latency similar to fiber. Later this year, it will actually be faster than fiber. That's a fact. I would encourage ECD to invest part of this money into maybe looking at doing some kind of rebate on the equipment that folks will have to purchase for their homes. It's going to be a lot better investment of our money than trying to run a wire in front of 1,000 homes and only have 300 and some odd homes taking that service, which is exactly what we're doing right now. So the actual investment of this money, I question from the standpoint of new technology, and I just implore ECD to really look into that as how they structure the rules around this money. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman Todd. And I believe we are back to Leader Lamberth if no one else has their name on. Okay. Leader Lamberth for a response.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just in response on the professional privilege tax, we've discussed this before, and I know that Leader Gant has been pushing hard for that professional privilege tax to go away. I will say this as someone who pays that. $100 drop in it is almost insulting to just do $100 unless it's part of a multi-year effort to stair step this down and do away with it. $100 is really not, I think, what we're looking for. I appreciate the governor's effort to try to do that and make a proposal, but I would prefer a holistic approach to this. And I will join in my colleagues in saying next year, let's take a swing at truly doing away with the professional privilege tax. It will be a bill that I probably don't vote on because it affects me directly, but there's hundreds of professionals out there that pay this, and it was put in by a previous administration to plug a budget hole and then never taken back out again. So it's absolutely something we should get rid of, but dropping it at $100 in 1 year without a multi-stage, multi-year effort, or without doing it all in one fell swoop, simply just wasn't palatable, at least to me. I'd rather just do away with this all at once, do it all at once. Let's jump in and actually handle this issue. So while it's removed from the proposed budget, the effort remains. And I know Leader Gant would amen and say that, that he's got a bill on this. I mean, it's going to continue to stay alive. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chair Lady, for your presentation on the budget bill. I do have some concerns. I mentioned a few in budget subcommittee, but like many of my colleagues, we got the schedule 5 minutes before we came into committee, so we really didn't get to scrub it the way we should have had an opportunity to do. And looking at some of the bills that were funded behind the budget, I have some concerns about. Matter of fact, we just actually attached an amendment to this bill, House Bill 513. So I'd like some discussion on what that is. If the member that proposed that amendment could talk about what that bill is that we funded. We just actually agreed to be just attached to this bill. So I'd like some conversation on that. I respected the sponsors' request for us to just attach everything and then have a full discussion on all of the amendments at once. So I'd like to talk about, explain House Bill 13 that we just added to this budget.
Thank you, Leader Camper. We're going to go to Leader Lamberth.
Thank you. And there are multiple bills that are proposed in this budget that would have to actually pass in their form on the floor where they will be considered. All that amendment does is says that that bill, if passed, would be funded, as well as, there are dozens of other bills in here that will be behind the budget. And we absolutely will have a robust discussion on that particular piece of legislation, just as we will with the rest. But it is attached to a specific piece of legislation, and no vote on the budget would be an indication that you support that potential piece of legislation or oppose it. That is a standalone bill. So the amendment is only to give that an opportunity to fully be heard in the House and Senate.
Leader Camper.
I understand what the leader is saying, but yesterday when we went through the appropriations process, there were bills and there were amendments, budget amendments that was agreed upon, and members expected to see those reflective in the document that we were looking at. This is one that wasn't in there, and there's another one that's on here that appears to have been pulled from behind the budget that we didn't get full notice on. And I just would like, for the record, since we are in finance, it does have an implication. It was adopted separate and apart from the other schedule. I'd like for at least some conversation on what that bill is going to do before we get to the floor, since it's before our committee right now and it has a fiscal implication. That's the only point. But we adopted it separate from the full schedule.
Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman Baum. Leader Camper, just a point of clarification, yesterday in Appropriations Subcommittee, we did not take up any bills. Appropriations is on the Appropriations Subcommittee, and the schedule as such is depicted on on the previous page on the distribution list that you've gotten. All the bills that are behind the budget or funded in this schedule obviously have the capacity to pass in the House, and they have to pass in the House and the Senate. To my knowledge, there's a couple on here that the House is not interested in, and if we don't pass them, they simply aren't funded. I hope that clears up any confusion regarding that.
Leader Camper.
I understand. You're correct. I understand, but I still would like an explanation on that bill. And there's one other one too, Mr. Chairman. If we could just at least talk about what it does before we move it out of this committee.
She knows what it is. I mean, like, you won't just have that. I mean, like, Ron. Hey,
Leader
Mr. Chairman,
Lambert.
I know the sponsor of that bill, I mean, he happens to be on the committee, but I mean, we can have him read the caption, but again, and Leader, I know you're asking about that specific bill, but I mean, every single bill that is behind the budget will have to go through budget sub, budget full, and be fully discussed just because something is proposed in the budget, if passed, to be funded. And I know you know this, you've been down here longer than I have, but I mean, we'll have the sponsor, since he happens to be on the committee, read the caption. But I mean, to have a full debate on the bill, I mean, if we were to debate every single bill that is in the proposed budget, this will obviously take quite some time. So would reading the caption potentially be enough for today's purposes, knowing that that bill is not funded yet because it has not gone to budget sub, budget full, and has not been fully vetted through the process yet? That'll be, I'm assuming, next week, but I'm trying real hard not to look at Chairman Hicks for a nod, and he's nodding. So that's next week for a full debate, but we can have the sponsor at least read the caption if that would be sufficient. I'm just trying to be helpful.
Leader Camper.
I understand what you're saying, but the point I'm making is that that amendment was a standalone amendment to the budget document. And generally, when we are adding an amendment, there's opportunity to discuss, debate, and talk about it before it's adopted to whatever bill. And this just happened to be the budget bill. So what I'm saying is the chairman asked, allow me to adopt them all and put them on and then hold a conversation. Otherwise, we could have held the conversation before we adopted it. That's the point I'm making, and I'm just asking to talk about it because we didn't get to talk about it before we added it to the budget document, and it was a standalone amendment.
Leader Lambert.
Thank you. And from a logistical standpoint, the reason that was added in, every bill that was still moving through the process basically was supposed to be in these budget documents so that it has an opportunity to be heard through the committee process. That bill, for whatever reason, had not been included in, and the intention was for it to be included in for at least consideration and debate, exactly as you were asking for. It was not. It is at least in this budget document to be considered. And I think the sponsor, I've been trying to answer some questions while he was getting the caption up, and I think he's ready. If the chairman wanted to recognize him, I think he has that ready.
Thank you. I have the caption up, so Leader Gant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Leader Camper, I guess you want me just to read the caption? Is that what you're?
I just wanted to know what it is we adopted
Okay,
to this
all right.
as a standalone amendment that we did not get to discuss before we add. The other ones were adopted as a group, proposed, as the chairman said, to the budget. This one was by itself out there, and we did not get to debate it or talk about it or the fiscal implications of it. So I've just explained the amendment.
Leader Gant.
Okay, so you're asking for an explanation of the amendment, not the caption of the actual bill. I will yield to, Mr. Chairman, if you will
Yeah.
yield to Representative Zachary.
Chairman Zachary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, since I'm the one that did put the amendment on.
Okay.
So, Leader, it is my understanding that this was supposed to have been included. It was not. This is our opportunity to add the potential to fund into the budget, but we still have to go through the process beginning next week. This bill has to be presented and heard in Chairman Hicks' committee because right now it's behind the budget because of the error in the funding. And so we have to add that today because we are discussing the appropriations bill. And then next, is it Monday or Tuesday when budget sub meets? They will have a full debate on this bill. And I believe you're on that committee, so you'll have the opportunity to do it at that time. This was simply adding an amendment that, that I did add to clarify and correct to ensure that the funding is there if the body chooses to pass it. That's at the will of the body and the committees, the finance committee, to be able to do that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Lamar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was also looking at this document and I see there has been appropriation of $1 million and then 247,000 for a new statewide chancery court. So we already have chancery courts in our counties, if I'm not mistaken. So could someone explain to me why we're funded a new chancery court?
Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Again, there's legislation that is, and I can't remember. That too is on the behind the budget calendar. So there'll be discussion about that at the appropriate time. That bill still has. So you'll have an opportunity actually multiple times to ask questions about that bill, Representative Lamar, because we will be dealing with it in Finance Sub, Finance Full, and then if it passes from there, it will go to the floor. And only then, if it passes there, will it be funded. So very similar posture to the amendment that we just talked about with Chairman Zachary.
Okay, thank you, Chair Lady, for the explanation because I just had some concerns about that and I wanted to.
And there'll be
get
an
some questions.
opportunity, several opportunities, as I said, to discuss those concerns.
Any further discussion? If not, then we are voting on sending House Bill 1153 to calendar and rules. All in favor say aye. Opposed? Passes. House Bill 1153 moves to calendar and rules. Item number 2 on our calendar is House Bill 1151. Got a motion and a second. Chair Lady Hazelwood, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is increasing the amount by which state appropriations from state tax revenues for the upcoming fiscal year may exceed the index of estimated growth in the state's economy. That's 2.37%.
Thank you for that explanation. Discussion on the bill? If not, then we're voting to send House Bill 1151 to calendar and rules. All in favor say aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. 1151 moves to calendar and rules. Item number 3 on our calendar is House Bill 1154. Got a motion and a second. We have an amendment. Amendment number 1 is drafting code 7813. Got a motion and a second on the amendment. I think it'd be most efficient if we go ahead and put this on the bill. So absent objection, we're voting on putting amendment number 1 on House Bill 1154. All in favor say aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Amendment number 1 goes on the bill. Chair Lady Hazelwood, we're ready for a brief discussion or description on this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the bill that makes changes to the code necessary to implement the budget that we are in the process of enacting. Section 1 in that bill enacts a sales tax holiday on groceries. As you know, we have an annual sales tax, back to school sales tax holiday that we've been doing in the state for a number of years. Last year, we had an esteemed member of this body, that would be me, had a bill to do a sales tax holiday for food for a month. Because of COVID and other things, that idea was dropped, but the governor thought it was a great idea and he put it into his budget. We it's currently, I think in its original budget, it was been $100 million. just because of other things other ways that we're spending our money in with our savings account and paying off our obligations. We have dropped that to $50 million, and there'll be a sales tax holiday on for groceries and restaurants for prepared foods from July 30th, 2021 to August 5th, 2021. That will be the same weekend as the back to school sales tax holiday, but this will be for a whole week. So we hope that will, I think there was some confusion last year when we did have our sales tax holiday on restaurants about, when, and we had a couple of weekends and all that. This will be 1 week. It'll be in conjunction with the back to school sales tax holiday. So hopefully that will ensure that more Tennesseans take advantage. That sales tax will be split 75% on restaurants and prepared foods and 25% on groceries. With that, Mr. Chairman, I would stand ready for any questions.
Thank you for that explanation. Do we have questions? Discussion? Question's been called. Absent objection, then we are voting on sending House Bill 1154 to calendar and rules. All in favor say aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. House Bill 1154 moves on to calendar and rules. Item number 4 on our agenda is House Bill 1152. Got a motion and a second on the bill. Chair Lady Hazelwood, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill, we pass it every year. It's just a habit in case of an emergency situation. It authorizes the state to issue and sell bonds up to $126 million. But let me emphasize, there is no debt in this year's budget. This is simply a backup plan. As we have seen the past year, the world can kind of change on a dime. So we need to have this in place should we have to avail ourselves of it. But there is no debt contemplated in or included in this budget.
Thank you. You've heard the explanation. Any discussion on this bill? If not, then we're ready to vote to send House Bill 1152 to calendar and rules. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. House Bill 1152 moves to calendar and rules.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Baum. You did an excellent job. And that does complete our calendar for today. The appropriations calendar will be considered in Calendar and Rules Committee, which will immediately follow this meeting. Chairman Zachary, I think I stepped on your lines, and for that I apologize. But would you like to repeat that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. To our esteemed chair, you did a fantastic job. I don't think I need to add anything other than we will meet immediately following finance.
Is there any further business to come before this committee? Representative Lynn.
Do we know what the rest of the day will look like? I think we have session at 3:30, as maybe our leader could fill us in on that. 3 o'clock?
Leader Lambert, Representative Lynn is asking just for a rundown of the expectations for the rest of our day.
Yes, I can give the best information that I have right now. For the Republican caucus, I believe there is a lunch and a presentation on some items at that time. There is a bill review meeting at 2 o'clock. There is session at 3 o'clock, is my understanding. So I think that's what the rest of the day is, and there's calendar and rules right now. So to my knowledge, and I'm sure your phones will be lighting up with text messages if I said any of that wrong just now, but the biggest thing is that, session is at 3 o'clock.
We do stand in recess.